December 1923, northern Finland, 8 miles northeast of Kuusamo. 15 men cutting timber in forest that hadn't seen axes in 100 years. Then we found the tracks. Not bear, not moose. Something that walked upright and left prints 22 inches long, pressed 8 inches into frozen ground. Something that pushed over full-grown pines without cutting them. Something that watched us from the tree line with eyes that caught lamplight like a wolf's, but 6 feet off the ground. By the second week, we knew we weren't alone. By Christmas, we knew we were being hunted. This is what happened during the 31 days before we abandoned that camp and everything in it. Subscribe for more true historical horror stories. I arrived at the camp on November 28, 1923, the day before the first snow that wouldn't melt until April. 23 years old, broke, and desperate enough to take work nobody else wanted. The previous crew had cleared out in mid-November, 2 weeks ahead of contract. Company said equipment failure. Locals in Kuusamo said the men came back different, wouldn't talk about what they'd seen. They paid 3 times normal wages for winter logging in that sector. That's how I knew something was wrong, but I signed on anyway. The foreman was Antti Mäkinen, 58 years old, built like a draft horse, face carved from granite and wind. He'd logged these forests for 40 years, said he knew every trail and stream for 30 miles. The crew was small, 15 counting Antti and myself. Most were Finns, 2 Karelians, 1 Norwegian. Men who needed the money bad enough to work through winter, far from towns, far from families. The bunkhouse smelled like pine tar, tobacco smoke, and wet wool. We slept in our clothes. Temperature inside never got above freezing. The work was brutal and simple. Up before dawn, work until dark, which came at 3 in the afternoon. We were cutting old-growth pine, some of them 4 feet thick, 200 years old. Cross-cut saws, axes, horses to drag the logs to the staging area. Antti had laid out a grid. We'd work 1 section at a time, felling and trimming, then move the horses through to haul. The contract called for 300 trees by spring 4. We had 4 months, God willing and weather holding. The camp sat in a natural clearing, maybe 2 acres, surrounded by forest so dense you couldn't see 20 yards into it. Bunkhouse, cookhouse, equipment shed. A stream ran 50 yards west, still flowing but crusted with ice. Antti had marked the boundaries with surveyor's tape tied to trees, 1/4-mile perimeter where we'd fell and work. Beyond that was old forest, untouched. He said the Sami people had stories about those trees, wouldn't camp there, wouldn't hunt there. Said they called it Peikon Ma, troll country. We laughed at that. Old wives' tales, we figured. We figured wrong. The first 3 days went normal. We fell 6 trees, trimmed them, hauled them to the staging area. Cold so sharp it hurt to breathe, but the work kept us warm. Evenings we ate Heikki's stew, mostly turnips and salt pork, sometimes dried fish, and played cards until the lamps burned down. Nobody talked much. That's how loggers are. You save your breath for the work. On the 4th day, December 2nd, Oskar Virtanen found the first tracks. He had gone north to scout the next cutting section, half-mile from camp. Came back white-faced, said we needed to see something. 8 of us went with him, Antti leading. The tracks started at the tree line and crossed our surveyor's boundary, heading straight toward the camp before turning away again. 22 inches long, I measured them myself. 10 inches wide at the ball. 5 toes, but the proportions were wrong. Too long, too splayed. Whatever made them walk upright pushed down 8 inches into snow that barely held our weight at 4. Auntie said bear, but bears don't walk that far on hind legs, and their prints don't look human. These did. Almost human, but scaled up like you'd taken a man's foot and built it twice as large. We followed the trail for 200 yards. It came from deep forest, crossed our perimeter, circled the camp at a distance, then headed back into the trees. The spacing between prints suggested a stride of nearly 6 feet. Whatever it was stood at least 8 feet tall, probably more. Moose, Auntie said finally. Hoof prints filled with snow look like that sometimes. But his voice had an edge I hadn't heard before. We went back to work, but nobody sang or joked the rest of that day. That night, Heikki boiled extra water and made sure the doors were latched. Small things, precautions men take when they don't want to admit they're nervous. December 4th, we found the tree, 100-foot pine, 3 feet thick, pushed over like someone had leaned on it. The base wasn't cut. It was shoved until the roots gave way, torn out of ground, frozen hard as iron. We'd been working that section the day before. The tree was standing then. It fell sometime in the night. No wind that night, no storm. The trees around it were untouched. Just this one, pushed over with such force, the impact crater went down. 2 feet. Equipment, Auntie said. Someone's operating heavy equipment at night. Company competition, maybe. Trying to scare us off the contract. But there were no machine tracks. No engine sounds had woken us. And the nearest mechanical equipment that could push over a tree like that was in Kuusamo, 8 miles away. We fell 6 more trees that day, worked hard, didn't talk about it. But I noticed Laurie had started keeping his axe by his bunk. So had I. The sounds started December 6th. Deep, resonant calls from the forest starting around 10 at night when we doused most lamps. Not wolves. We knew wolves. Not owls. Not any bird I'd heard in 2-3 years. Low frequency. Almost below hearing. Something you felt in your chest more than heard with ears. 3 or 4 seconds long, then silence. Then another call from a different direction, like something circling the camp, communicating. Owls, Auntie said. But Jukka, the Norwegian, had worked in Nordland, said he'd heard sounds like that before. Old loggers up there called them troll songs, said it meant you were working land that belonged to something else. Auntie told him to shut his mouth. We didn't need superstitious nonsense spooking the crew. But the sounds continued for 3 nights straight, circling, always moving, always from the deep forest beyond our perimeter. December 9th, we lost the horses. Both of them gone sometime before dawn. We'd penned them in the paddock behind the equipment shed. Good strong fence, 6-foot rails. The fence was smashed outward, rails snapped like kindling. Drag marks in the snow led into the forest. Not cut, broken. The marks showed where something had grabbed the rails and pulled, ripped them right out of the post holes. We followed the trail, Auntie, myself, Oscar and Pekka carrying axes. The drag marks continued for a 1/4 mile, blood in the snow every 50 feet. Then we found the first horse, or what was left. It had been torn apart, not eaten, legs pulled off, rib cage cracked open. The head was missing entirely. No predator I knew killed like that. Bears eat what they kill. Wolves work in packs, leave different signs. This was something else. The second horse we found another 100 yards on, draped over a fallen log 10 feet off the ground, positioned like someone had placed it there to be seen. Antti stood looking at it for a long minute, not speaking. Then he said, "Back to camp. Now we're fortifying tonight." That afternoon we worked like men possessed, dragging more logs to camp, building a fence around the bunkhouse and cookhouse, 8-foot wall of pine trunks lashed with rope and wire. We hauled every tool inside, barricaded the equipment shed. Antti had a rifle, Heikki had a shotgun. We set up watch rotations, 2 men awake at all times. Nobody said it out loud, but we all knew. We were under siege. Something was hunting us. December 11th, the thing showed itself. Ollie was on watch. 2 in the morning. He saw it at the forest edge, where the moonlight couldn't quite reach, standing upright, 8 or 9 feet tall, broad across the shoulders, like 2 men side by side. It didn't move, just stood there, watching. When Ollie raised the lamp, it stepped back into the trees, gone. But the next morning we found prints circling the entire camp, 20 yards outside our log wall. It had walked the full circuit, inspecting us, taking our measure. Antti wanted to hold. We had food for 2 months, fuel for the stoves, ammunition. But Jukka said no, we needed to leave, said he'd seen this before in Norway. Ancient things in old forests, territorial, patient, intelligent. They don't attack right away. They study. They wait for fear to break you down, make you stupid. Then they strike when you're weakest. Antti called him a coward. Jukka said he was a realist. 3 other men sided with Jukka. We took a vote. 8 wanted to stay and finish the contract. 7 wanted to leave. Antti said, majority ruled, we stayed. That was our mistake. December 13th, it started testing our defenses. We heard it moving around the perimeter in darkness. Heavy footsteps in snow, breathing that sounded like wind through a cave. Something struck the wall once, hard enough to shake the entire structure. Then silence. In the morning we found handprints on the logs. 5 fingers, proportioned human but grotesquely large. The palm print measured 19 inches across. Whatever it was had leaned against our wall, pressed hard enough to compress the snow coating the logs. Marking territory. Claiming ownership. We doubled the watch. 4 men now, rotating every 2 hours. Nobody slept well. The sounds continued, those deep, resonant calls from multiple points around us, coordinated. Sometimes close, sometimes distant, like it was communicating with others. Antti still insisted it was just one animal, probably diseased or mad. But the footprints showed different sizes, at least 3 distinct individuals, maybe more. We were surrounded. December 15th, it took Heikki's dog. Heikki had brought his terrier for ratting, kept it chained by the cookhouse. The dog barked non-stop from midnight to 3 in the morning, snarling at the darkness beyond the wall. Then it went silent mid-bark. Not a whimper, just cut off. In the morning, the chain was snapped, collar empty, blood trail leading over the wall and into the forest. The chain was steel, rated for bear traps. It had been torn apart like string. Heikki wanted to go after the dog. Antti wouldn't let him. We stayed inside the compound, worked on equipment maintenance, sharpened tools. Pretended we were just waiting out bad weather, but we were prisoners. We'd built our own cage and locked ourselves inside. The things, owned the forest. We owned 50 yards of cleared ground. December 18th, they started leaving gifts. A deer carcass, positioned outside our wall, legs broken and twisted into unnatural angles. Another horse leg, the missing one from our slaughtered draft animal. A pile of pine branches, each one exactly 4 feet long, stacked in a perfect cairn. They were showing us they could count, they could build, they were intelligent. That terrified us more than the killings. You can fight a beast, you can't fight something that thinks, plans, understands fear, and how to use it. Pekka started praying. He'd been Lutheran most of his life, but now he dug out an old Kalevala, started reading passages about Tapio, Lord of the Forest, about ancient things that walked before men came north. Jukka said prayers wouldn't help, said these were older than prayers, older than the gods men knew. They'd walked these forests when glaciers still covered the land, and they'd walked them after we were bones. Auntie told them both to shut up. We needed to keep our heads. We had ammunition, walls, fire. We could outlast one winter. Come spring, we'd leave with the thaw, finish the contract next year with a full crew and better defenses. But we weren't going to see spring. December 20th, the siege intensified. They came every night now, 3 or 4 of them, circling the camp in perfect coordination. We'd hear them calling to each other in those deep, resonant tones, then moving, footsteps crunching snow, always keeping just beyond rifle range. Sometimes they'd rush the wall, strike it with what must have been fists or shoulders, then retreat before we could get a clear shot. They were testing us, learning our patterns, counting our numbers. One night, Oscar fired at movement in the tree line. He swore he hit it, saw it jerk and turn. We found blood in the snow the next morning. Dark, thick, wrong-smelling. Not like any animal I'd tracked. But there was no body. It had walked away, leaving a blood trail for 50 yards before it vanished into undergrowth. If we'd wounded it, it hadn't slowed it down. That night, they destroyed part of our wall. Just pulled the logs apart, 3 or 4 working together, wrenched them until the lashing gave way. We drove them off with rifle fire, spent the next day rebuilding. We were running out of ammunition. December 22nd, the winter solstice, longest night of the year. Darkness from 4 in the afternoon to 9 the next morning. 17 hours of night. They came at full dark, all of them, coordinated assault on 3 sides. We heard them coming, heavy footfalls, that deep calling sound, building into something like roaring. We fired into the darkness, heard impacts, heard one of them scream, a sound that rattled the windows and made my ears ring. But they kept coming. They hit the east wall in force, smashed through the barrier like it was kindling. We fell back to the bunkhouse, 7 of us firing from the windows while the others barricaded the door. I saw one clearly for the first time, framed in the gap they'd torn. 9 feet tall, shoulders broader than any man I'd ever seen, arms that hung past its knees. The head was large, heavy-browed, but the details were shadow. It stood there in the moonlight, looking at us. And I knew, absolutely knew, it was counting us. Learning, planning. Then it turned and walked away, deliberately slow. The others followed. They'd made their point. They could come in whenever they wanted. We couldn't stop them. That night, huddled in the bunkhouse with every lamp burning, Auntie finally admitted it. We leave tomorrow. Pack what we can carry. The company can have their timber and their contract. Jukka said, they won't let us leave. And in my gut, I knew he was right. We'd stayed too long, challenged their territory, wounded one of them. Now it was personal. We spent December 23rd preparing, stripped the camp of everything we could carry. Food, ammunition, tools, money from the equipment shed lockbox. We'd leave at first light, move fast, make Kuusamo by nightfall if we'd pushed hard. 8 miles through forest and snow, but we were loggers. We could do 8 miles. Auntie plotted a route following the stream, open ground, where we couldn't be ambushed. We'd move in tight formation, weapons ready. Anyone who fell behind got left. Hard words, but necessary. We all agreed. That last night, they surrounded us completely. I counted 7 distinct sets of tracks circling the compound. 7 of them, maybe more. They didn't attack. They didn't need to. They just walked their circuit, calling to each other in those deep voices, letting us know we were trapped, letting us feel the fear. We didn't sleep. We sat with our backs to the walls, rifles loaded, axes by our hands, and waited for dawn. Every sound outside made us flinch. Every call made us count minutes until sunrise. December 24th, Christmas Eve, we made our run. Left the bunkhouse at first light when the sky was barely grey. 15 men, moving fast, staying tight. Auntie led, I was middle, Juka took rear guard. We made the stream by 8 o'clock, followed it west toward Kuusamo. The forest was silent. No birds, no wind, just our breathing and the crunch of snow under boots. We found the first body at 9:30. Matti Korhonen, one of the previous crew. He'd been there since November, frozen solid, positioned sitting against a tree, eyes still open. They'd killed him and arranged him like a warning marker. Like they knew we'd come this way, we didn't stop. We kept moving. The attacks started at 10. They came from both sides, 3 of them, rushing from the forest in coordinated strikes. We broke formation, some men running, others standing to fight. Oscar fired 6 times, hit one center mass. It slowed but didn't stop. Pekka swung his axe, connected with something. Then he was down, thrown 20 feet into the stream bed. We heard his ribs break. Auntie shouted for us to keep moving, leave the wounded. Brutal, necessary. We ran. They pursued, but not to kill, to separate us. Pick off stragglers. Turn our column into scattered individuals. Every man for himself. I saw Laurie go down, grabbed from behind by something I didn't see clearly, saw Heike try to help him, then both were gone, dragged into the underbrush, screaming. By noon, there were 8 of us left. We'd covered maybe 4 miles halfway to Kuusamo. They'd stopped pursuing, fallen back, but we could see them in the trees, pacing us, watching, waiting for us to tire. Auntie said we couldn't stop, had to keep moving, or we'd freeze and they'd take us in the dark. So we moved. 3 more we lost in the afternoon, picked off 1 at a time when they fell behind, too exhausted to keep pace. We heard them screaming, then silence. By 4 o'clock, when the sun was already setting, there were 5 of us. Auntie, Jukka, Oli, myself, and Erkki. We'd covered 7 miles. 1 mile from Kuusamo, 1 mile from houses and people and safety. We broke into a run, terror giving us strength we didn't have. Behind us, they were coming, all of them. No more stalking, just open pursuit. I could hear them breathing, hear their footfalls, feel the ground shake. We burst out of the forest onto the road, saw the first houses of Kuusamo, lights in windows, smoke from chimneys. We screamed for help. Doors opened. Men came out with rifles and torches. The things stopped at the forest edge. I looked back, saw them standing there, 7 or 8 of them, just watching. One of them, the largest, raised its head and called, that deep, resonant sound I'd heard for 3 weeks. The others answered. Then they turned and walked back into the forest. Slow, deliberate. They'd made their point. The forest was theirs. The 5 of us were the only survivors. 7 men dead, 3 missing and presumed dead. The company paid death benefits to families, listed it as equipment accident. There was talk of sending a military unit to investigate, but nothing came of it. The area was declared off-limits for logging, officially due to soil instability. The camp we abandoned is still there, far as I know. Nobody goes near it. I'm 81 years old now, writing this in Helsinki, 60 miles from those woods. I left logging after that winter. Worked on the docks, worked in factories, anything that kept me away from deep forest. I got married, had children, lived a normal life. But I never forgot those 31 days. Never forgot the sound of their calls, the size of their footprints, the intelligence in how they hunted us. People ask if I believe in trolls now. I tell them I don't know what to believe. The Sami called them Peko, forest giants, older than memory. Stories going back 1,000 years, maybe longer. Every few decades, someone reports something in those northern woods. Loggers, hunters, hikers who wander too deep. Most people laugh it off. I don't laugh. I know what I saw. I know what stalked us for a month, played with us like a cat plays with mice, let 5 of us escape, because killing us all would have brought too much attention. The Kalevala says some things in the north are older than gods, older than men. They were here when glaciers covered the land. They'll be here when we're gone. We're just visitors in their territory. Temporary. Tolerated only so long as we remember our place. We forgot. They reminded us. That's all. I only know what happened in December 1923. 8 miles from Kuusamo, in forest that belonged to something before we had words for ownership. We left, they stayed. That's how these things end. The forest always wins.